everybody. Welcome to the Good Evening Kitties podcast, a Tales from the Crypt review. My name is Melissa, your ghostess with the mostest, and today's episode is Season 4, Episode 2, This'll Kill Ya. So let's go ahead and get into it. As always, John Kassir does the voice of the Crypt Keeper, and Danny Elfman does the theme song. This episode was directed by Robert Longo, who also directed movies like Johnny Mnemonic. The screenplay was written by A.L. Katz and Gilbert Adler. And this episode stars Sonia Braga from TV's American Family, Dylan McDermott from TV's The Practice, and Cleavon Little from movies like Blazing Saddles. This episode aired June 27th, 1992, and the description on the box says, "A prescription for doom. Co-workers at a drug research firm give a cruel boss a dose of his own medicine." So this is one of those revenge-y type ones. A lot of those are like that. So this episode starts out, the Crypt Keeper is in his crypt, and he's a carpenter, and he's hammering a nail into a board of wood, and he hits his thumb, and he's like, I love it when that happens. So of course he likes the pain. He likes to be hurt. And it's kind of gross because what they did is he hits his finger, and it's gross, but it's kind of cool. Like, he holds his finger up, and you can see it pulsing, like where he hit it. So like it's like throbbing. So that's kind of cool. He's hurting himself here in the beginning. And he's got these little overalls on and a little work shirt, building things up, and he's using what he says is his little ghoul box instead of his little toolbox. And then he brings in the episode. And so this one starts out a little gory, and it opens up as this, I guess it's like a Jeep, some kind of like, I don't know, Jeepy SUV type car, pulls up, and it opens up with a real bloody scene here of the back of the trunk of the car opening up. And there's a man there who's dead, and he's got this blunt force trauma head wound that's pretty gnarly looking, and this is what the episode opens up to. So I was like, phew, okay. So it starts with like this traumatic injury, right? And so there's blood everywhere, and so this guy pulls the dead body out of the car and starts dragging it by its feet up to a police station. And as he's dragging it, it's just leaving like this trail of blood. It's pretty graphic. He's just slowly dragging this guy by one foot, and there's just blood. And so he gets to the police station, and he drags the body in, and the guy's just like the cop's just like, oh, okay,
Holy shit.
I'm dead. And this is the guy that killed me.
Okay, buddy. Just raise your hands. Keep 'em where I can see them.
Go ahead and shoot me now. It doesn't matter. You see, I'm dead already. You should have seen it coming.
So he goes in there, and he comes in, and he's like, this guy that I'm dragging here on the ground, played by Cleavon Little, is the man who killed me. Even though technically the guy who's talking is still alive. This guy is named George, and he's played by Dylan McDermott. And so George is dragging this body into the police station. And he's like, this guy is the guy that killed me. I know I'm not dead yet, but that's what's happening, and you have to understand. And the cops are immediately just like pulling guns like, okay, dude, you're crazy. And so George is like, just shoot me, it doesn't matter, I'm gonna be dead anyway soon. And so you're like, what's going on? So this is like a flash forward to what's gonna happen later. So now we go back, and it's at this drug company, or it's just like a lab kind of thing. And Sonia Braga, whose name is Sophie in this, is going through a fridge, like a small fridge, and she's looking for insulin. Now there's all these other little bottles of things in there for their lab, and the insulin should not be in there. The insulin is for George. He's insulin dependent, diabetic, and he hates needles. So he wants Sophie to give him his insulin for the day because he can't stand to do it to himself. And so she's looking for it because you got to keep insulin in the fridge. So she's looking for it, and she's like, this isn't good. You have all these other things that we're working on in here. If I didn't read the label, it'd be a problem. And you're like, oh, foreshadowing. Okay. And so she's looking at this, and she pulls out the insulin, and it's next to a bottle of something that's called H-Cell 24, which I'll get to in a little bit. That's what they're working on right now. That's like their big project. So he has her give him the insulin, and then during this, like, she gives him the insulin, and he's kind of a flirty dude, like kind of creepy like to her. She's over it. Apparently they've had a past, and she's just like, you just stop. So she like jabs the needle in his arm, and he can't even look, like he just can't do it. I don't know how he does it any other time. I guess she does it every day. I don't know. So then in walks Pac Brightman, who is another colleague, and this is Cleavon Little, who we will see later, who is dead. So we know that this guy's gonna die. He comes in and he's mad. And he's mad at George and he's yelling,
George, you're a son of a bitch. I just want you to explain to me why you continue to do this kind of thing.
Do what?
Oh, George just put out another press release without even telling us.
George, you didn't.
Oh, yes, he did. And this time he really went to town. Mr. George Gatlin asserted that he and his partners, Pac Brightman and Sophie Wagner, have developed a hybrid cell that will revolutionize the treatment of disease by breeding the disease out of it. Our results, says Mr. Gatling, show that H-Cell 24 will be both inexpensive and safe.
You have a problem with that, Pac?
George, you told them we're ready for human testing?
We will be.
George apparently put out paper without them knowing that said that they were basically, or he put out like a press release that said that the lab was basically ready for human trials for this H-Cell 24, which helps fight disease. And it's not suitable for human testing, but he's like jumping the gun and letting them know that that's what's going on. And so they all get in a big fight. Everyone's mad at George. George is mad at everyone. He's just basically pushing things too fast. And if they do start doing human trials and it's not ready, I mean, they could get shut down. They'll lose like their grants or whatever that's keeping their stuff going. And basically Sophie and Pac are just sick of him undermining them and making them look bad or making them have to work harder on stuff that's not even true yet. And so they're just mad. They're frustrated. So now it cuts to a bar and Sophie's there and she's just drinking away her troubles. She's upset. And I like her in this. She's like kind of got a sass to her that's kind of, I like her. And so as she's there at the bar just trying to get away from George, up comes George and he kisses her on the cheek and she's like, ew, get away. And he's kind of flirting with other ladies around her and then flirting with her, and she's just like, what is happening? What I don't like about this character of George, I mean, Dylan McDermott plays it really well. Like, he's just a creep. But that's the thing, is he's so cocky that's the thing that kind of bugs me about him. So they're kind of talking it out, and she's basically saying, like, you really shouldn't have done this, we're not ready, the drug trials aren't ready.
The last time you put me stunt like this was bad enough. Telling that venture capitalist guy the H-Cell 24 was patented.
It was patented.
Right. 6 months after you told him. You could have compromised the whole project.
But we didn't, though, did we? Huh? Did we? No.
That's not the point. Some of us care about our integrity, you know?
And he kind of starts, like, hitting on her, and she has this great line here, and what she says is,
Right now, the idea of being intimate with you makes me sick.
And the way she says it, like, and he's just real flirty with her, and it's just really good the way she says it. So she goes home, and she's at her house, and she's getting ready to get in the bathtub, so she's taking her robe off, and, you know, she's gonna be naked. From behind her comes in George, and she immediately is like, what are you doing here? And you're not supposed to be here, and she's exposed, and he comes in, and he's like, well, I had a key, so I thought I'd come in. I mean, apparently they were a thing, like I said, and she's like, I should have never done that, you know, just she's like, you need to get out, you need to leave. And so unfortunately, this episode here, right here, gets a little rapey. It was a little uncomfortable. She's upset, like, I don't know, I didn't like it. She's upset, she's telling him to get out, she's running at him and hitting at him. And then he, like, throws her up against the wall, and he's trying to kiss on her. At first, I'm like, okay, cool, she's gonna kick him out, right? That's, you know, she's mad. He, like, throws her in the bathtub and just starts, like, taking off her robe, and eventually she just kind of does it. Like, she's like, okay, cool. And I was like, oh, I don't like that. I don't like how he just kind of forced her into it, and then she was like, all right. And I'm like, oh, no. But that's what happens. So they hook up again. It's weird. So they do that. It's awkward. I didn't like it. And it cuts to the next, I guess it's early next morning or late. It looks like maybe even late that night. And he's getting ready to leave, saying he's heading back to the lab because he's got work to do. And she's just like, I can't believe I did that again, and I shouldn't. And does Pac know that we're sleeping together? And, you know, and he's like, who cares what he knows? It doesn't matter. She feels bad that she's doing this, but for some reason she can't quit him. I don't know why. He's not that great. I mean, I guess when you work with someone so closely and you have a history, I don't know. She's like, you know, we may have slept together, but we're not involved, so don't be getting all weird. I make many mistakes. This is one of them, kind of thing. So she's like, if you're leaving, get out of here. So he leaves. So he goes back to the lab, and it's early the next morning, I think. It looks like, yeah. And yeah, so he's apologizing to Pac and saying, like, I'm sorry about what I did, and I do mean it, and here I made you some coffee. And he's trying to, like, extend an olive branch, and Pac is not buying it. He's just like, you never apologize unless you want something. And then he's just like, nah, I don't want anything. And he's got just such this smirk on his face all the time that you just want to slap it out of his face. And so he is again saying he's sorry. Pac's like, fine, well, you won't do it again, right? So he goes to sit down, and Sophie comes in, and they're all just kind of hanging out and working. Pac goes to open that fridge up again. And he's like, hey, I picked up a couple things for you, and I'll put them in the fridge or, whatever. And I guess for their work. And then he's like, hey, will you get the insulin out? I need to get my stuff again. And Pac's like, well, I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to give you your medicine. You do it. But then Sophie's like, well, I'll do it. So they're getting the needle ready. And the way that they're looking at each other, you can tell something's a little up. They're not super obvious. And she gets the insulin in the needle. And she goes over to set it. And right before she gives it to him, Pac starts yelling that, oh no, that wasn't the insulin, that was the H-cell 24.
Grabbed the wrong vial. It was on the same shelf with the insulin.
It's 50 cc's, George. There are billions of H cells in there.
Listen, well, I'm not gonna die, am I? It's not gonna kill me, is it? Is it? Holy shit! You gotta inject me with something that turns it off.
That's what we were trying to tell yesterday, George. We don't have it. We don't have anything. We are at least 6 months away.
6 months.
And the way that Dylan McDermott freaks out is really good, actually. Like, he's immediately, like, you just see, like, the blood rush from his face. And he's like, oh my gosh, I'm dead. I'm dead. And part of me is like, yeah, maybe you shouldn't have been telling people that this stuff works if you're that scared of it. Because apparently what this thing does is it's supposed to, you inject it into a person who's sick with a certain disease, and then it, like, kills that disease. But so far, all it's been doing is causing a lot of tumors and killing the host. So they're still working on some stuff, and they need, like, an antidote and some things like that. So they're not quite there yet. And so immediately he's like, oh my gosh, that's it. I'm going to be covered in tumors. I'm dead. He's, like, freaking out. He's starting to, like, sweat. And Sophie's like, there are billions of H cells in there. It's not going to be good. Oh my gosh. They're freaking out too. So they've been kind of watching him over some time, and he's starting to kind of get faint and lay on the ground, and he's afraid of what's going to happen to him. He's not feeling well. And so he's like, honestly, what's going to happen to me? And Sophie's like, well, it's going to spread throughout your body and grow tumors, which he should probably kind of know if this was his job. But I think Sophie and Pac are more of the lab people, and he's more of like the grant writer and the boss kind of guy. So he might not know quite as much, which is another reason why you shouldn't be making accusations that you can do something that you can't when you don't know if you can. Anyway, she's like, you're going to get tumors everywhere. It's not going to be good. We're sorry. And then Pac's like, I've been trying to make an antidote, but it's not working. If I give it to you, it'll kill you. And so basically, George is like, how long do I have? And he's like, a couple of hours maybe. And I'm like, dang, this is a real fast-moving thing of H cells that they have. If it'll kill the host within like a couple hours, like, whew, it's pretty potent. So he's pretty freaked out. So he leaves, and he starts hallucinating. And he's hallucinating all these weird things. He's like hallucinating while he's at the bar, and everyone he looks at has all these nasty tumors, like growing out of their face or out of their chest, and it's really kind of gross. And he's just like picturing what's going to happen to him. He's like, oh my gosh, I'm going to have all these tumors, and just tumors everywhere. And so he's freaking out. So he starts hearing like some rumor or something that Sophie and Pac were hanging out together or something. And so he goes back over, like, from the bartender. The bartender said like they were hanging out or something down at the end of the bar earlier and like celebrating. And he was like, celebrating? Why would they be doing that? So he gets kind of suspicious, and he goes back over to Sophie's house, and the answer machine goes off. And that's where he hears a message from Pac.
Sophie, listen, I gotta talk to you. I'm still feeling guilty as hell about George. Fucking with his insulin and all. I'm not saying you weren't right. I think it had to be done, but... oh, shit. Call me, okay? Or better yet, why don't you meet me at the lab? There's some stuff I want to show you.
Oh my gosh, they were setting me up. They're trying to kill me because they're so mad of what I did and trying to take my work and our work and like do all this stuff. And so since no one ever talks to anybody in this, in things, in situations like this, he goes back over to the lab, and that's where Pac is working, and he comes up behind Pac, and he's got a bat. And so he's freaked out because he thinks he's going to die in a couple of hours, if not less. And there's just tumors everywhere. And he doesn't have any right now, but he knows that there will be some, if not some internally. So he's like, hey, Dr. Brightman. And Pac turns around and he's like, oh, hey, how are you? How are you feeling? And then he starts to tell him something. And he's like, hang on, I have some good news. I want to tell you something. And George is like, well, I have some news too. I found a cure. And he takes the bat and hits Pac in the head, like real good, like a real good, like whack right in the head. He's just like, poof. And it doesn't kill him, but it knocks Pac down, with the blunt force trauma from the beginning. And he's like stunned, and he's trying to talk. And George is really enjoying this murder. He's just like, yeah, that was great. I like hitting you. And he doesn't have time to explain, and he doesn't get to. He takes a huge needle full of the H cell 24 and jabs it straight into his chest, like into his heart, and shoots it in. And then the guy dies like a really weird death and just like shaking around from this injection of this concoction there of the H cell 24. So then it cuts back to the police station, and he's like, so go ahead, shoot me. He's dragged Pac's body in there. He's covered in blood. He beat Pac to death and injected him with all this stuff, which I guess he'll get tumors anyway. I don't know. He died. I think it was right into his heart, so it was pretty bad. And then I guess Sophie, from what I can gather, Sophie went back over to the lab, maybe saw that there was a scuffle, somehow knew he dragged him over to this certain police station. I don't know. I'm not quite sure how she knew which police station to go to, but she comes running in and she's all flustered. Because, yeah, I don't know. Maybe he left a note. I don't know. And so she comes all flustered, and she's freaking out, and she sees, this body of her friend Pac and her coworker. And she's like, oh my gosh, George, what did you do? And she's just like disgusted with him. She's like, what did you do?
There's nothing wrong with you, George. You're not dying. We did not inject you with the H cell. We doctored your insulin and added a little something to make you feel sick, that's all.
What are you talking about? What are you saying?
We're trying to teach you a lesson. To give you a better attitude before we told you the good news. For Christ's sake, George!
And she's like, no, you asshat. She's like, there's nothing wrong with you. You're not dying. She basically, so what they did is, it wasn't the H cell 24 they gave him. They just said that. They were planning to kind of give him a taste of his own medicine a little bit, I guess, because of the way he was with undermining them and promising things that they weren't sure they were going to be able to do and things like that. So what they did is they doctored his insulin and gave him a little something in it that would also make him feel a little sick. So like it wasn't going to kill him, but like the reason that he felt kind of unwell is because it was something that was in the insulin already. Like he wasn't going to die or anything. And she's like, yeah, we were trying to tell you. We didn't inject you into it. Like, they were kind of maybe going to let it go a little longer. Maybe they let it go a little longer than they should have. And so he got paranoid. And he's like, wait, what are you talking about? Are you serious? And she's like, yeah, we were trying to teach you a lesson. And then she's like, didn't you hear what Pac, like, because they already knew this good news. They're like, we're trying to teach you a lesson and then give you this good news, which is what Pac was trying to do before he got murdered. And the good news is that they solved the problem. They solved the problem for the human testing. They found that the H cell works. I guess they found an antidote or something that they could do to make it so that people wouldn't get tumors and they could start the human testing. And so then it just cuts to George's face and he's just like, oh, shit. Like, because basically, I mean, he's screwed. He's not going to die. He murdered this man in cold blood. Everyone sees it. He basically admitted it. He's done. You also probably shouldn't have let this go on. For Sophie and Pac, you probably should have told him after like an hour. I think it was probably at least like part of the day that they didn't tell him. I think after an hour or two, I would have been like, JK, you're not going to die. Ha ha ha, look, we found the antidote or whatever. But they didn't do that, so no, Pac is dead, unfortunately. And so he looks at the camera. George does, realizing the error of his ways. And then it cuts to black. And that's the end of this episode. And so it cuts over to the Crypt Keeper. And this part's kind of fun. He's hanging out, and so his project that he was building, like earlier in the beginning, he said he was building a bookcase for his library. Get it, guys? Library. And so now what he was building is like a hangman's post. So he's got this hanging block, and he's fixing it up, and he's hammering the last of it, and he's got the switch, and he's gonna hang a couple of these skeletons by their nooses. And so that's what he's kind of taking it out in, and he's throwing the puns around, and it's a nice setup. I mean, they had a lot of stuff in this crypt here, and then he pulls it, and they all hang. Crypt Keeper, you're so punny. And the best Crypt Keeper pun is,
I've always wanted a swing set. Just a little something for when I'm hanging out watching the news. See you next time. Now that's what I call well hung.
the next episode is season 4, episode 3, On a Dead Man's Chest. There is a little trivia here from IMDb. This was Cleavon Little's final filmed performance. And yeah, that's the end of season 4, episode 2, This'll Kill Ya. The next one is season 4, episode 3, On a Dead Man's Chest. Thank you so much for downloading and listening to this episode of the Good Evening Kitties podcast. If you'd like to reach me, you can email me at goodeveningpod@gmail.com. There's a Facebook page you can follow and leave a review on. You can leave a review on iTunes. You can also follow my Twitter, which is @GekPodcast, @GEKPodcast. And again, thank you so much for listening, and have a great one.
I just had quite a scare. I actually thought my heart was beating.